Hi there. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from. My name is Abhijit Bhaduri. I work as a leadership and talent coach. I work with organizations to talk about their leadership, talent, and culture strategies. Every week, we bring you some kind of an interesting person whose work can really change the way you work and think and look at life. And today I have one such person who is going to talk to you about what it takes to be a polymath. I mean, if you have more than one interest, does it make you a polymath? Does having two interests make you a polymath? Does three interests make you a polymath? And when you say interest, what could that particular thing mean? So those are questions that we are going to explore today. But one of the things that I must tell you that I am going to ask him about whether it is possible for someone to become a polymath at any stage of their life. And is it a good idea for an entrepreneur to be a polymath? There are lots of questions. And so, without any further ado, let me get started. And I'm going to play this little music for you. I hope. All right. And I have with me my friend Michael Araki. Michael joins
Hello.
us from Rio de Janeiro. Did I get the
Yeah,
pronunciation right? Okay, all
yeah,
right.
it's all right.
Uh, Thank you so much for being with us today. Um, just in terms of, I always think that I have everyone's bio, which you would have read when I posted about our show today. But I'm going to ask Michael to introduce himself and let us get started. So, Michael, how do you describe yourself? What are you all about? What is your interest? And how did you pick up this whole field of being a polymath? The only polymath that I can think of is Leonardo da Vinci, who used to draw, paint, design aircrafts, and write in crypto, all kinds of things. So maybe there are other people that I can think of. Satyajit Ray, who was an Indian filmmaker, he used to actually, besides of course doing cinematography, he wrote short stories, he illustrated them, he used to do all the scene planning, he composed music, he wrote music, he played instruments, he drew, all those things. So my God, I mean, is that many set of things that you have to do to be qualified as a polymath? Over to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Abraham. Thank you so much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here talking about this fascinating topic. So it's funny because I didn't know this word polymathy for many years, so I spent my life using other words like versatility, being a jack of all trades, but none of these words really struck a chord. So really could be something that I identified with. And I only knew of this word polymathy in late 2010 when I was reading a book from Carl Sagan. Dragons of Eden is the name of the book. And he was talking about how different cultures treat knowledge and the people who produce knowledge. And at the end of the chapter, he was talking about those people like Leonardo da Vinci, Benjamin Franklin, and others that have so many interests and that could unite them or combine those different sets of knowledge to produce so many new things. And not only new things that are useful, that can change or even reframe the path of a domain. So and then I just this word just struck a chord with me. Oh, that's something so interesting, and that I can relate to that idea of not only being like a butterfly in many places. It's cool, but just trying to get some substance out of different fields and different realms of human action, because it's not only about like book knowledge. It is about the different domains of a human experience. So it is about of experience of doing sports as well, and then something that's more emotional like poetry or music, and something more rational like mathematics and etc. So, and you had, and I knew from previous studies that in the past, for example, the Greek education for the wealth and rich and kings there in ancient Greece, they followed this kind of structure. So athletics when you're young, so you must know how to defend yourself, how to command a troop. Then you have to know the classics, the poetry, all the cultural background that makes that part of the world unique. And then, of course, for rulers and for people that are gonna be in a leadership position, you have to understand the mechanics of the world. Of course, they didn't have mathematics and engineering like we do today, but they had the state of the art knowledge. They had to know, which would be some kind of closer to what we know as hard sciences. And I knew that it existed, but we didn't have a word for that. And then polymathy make it work for me. However, after this spark of interest, I went to search, to seek for more information about that. And I couldn't find much structured knowledge. I found blog posts, magazine articles, some people here and there talking about their own experience or their own understanding of what polymathy is, of what being a polymathic person is. But I needed something more than opinions. So I tried to seek this structured knowledge about that. And at that point, I decided in my life that doing research was something that was in line with my professional ambitions, let's say, at that moment of my life. Prior to that, I worked in the IT industry. I was an English teacher. I was a cabin attendant to be able to fly the world. So I had also this range of experiences, and then I thought that it would be a cool path. And then I started studying polymathy seriously, and then I met some researchers. One of the most important of them is Robert Ruth Bernstein, and he started this, practically, he rekindled the research, the modern research on polymathy, and I was fortunate to be in contact with him and Michelle Ruth Bernstein as well. So we shared some presentations in the American Psychological Associations and other places. And then going further, I wanted to understand the personality and the natural drivers that can lead a person to become a polymath. So I went to study the determinants at the psychological and neurochemistry level. And then I met another psychologist called Irina Trofimova. She's from Russia originally, and she has been in McMaster University in Canada for many years. And she has a fascinating line of research where she tries to understand what are the most consistent kind of behaviors that humans have. And she has 12 of them. And I was talking to her, okay, can you predict who's going to be a polymath? And she said, I think I can. So she got her map, let's say, and she was talking to me about which characteristics would be found in polymathic people since they are young, and which ones they would have to work on to achieve this polymathic status, and which ones would be contrary, would be negatively associated with polymathy. And it was 4 years ago, and I finally, this year and last year, I finished doing the analysis, and it was spot on. Those characteristics really predicted who was more polymathic. And then I joined last year the Department of Entrepreneurship at Louisville, at University of Louisville. So I'm doing a lot of research at the interface of polymathy and entrepreneurship. So I try to see if there is a connection and which dimensions of polymathy are help people be more entrepreneurial. And those
All
are
right.
some cool research findings that we have. So that was my path. So it started as a interest one day, reading a book by chance, then going after that, meeting people and drawing from different knowledges from creativity research, psychology, neuroscience, and and then entrepreneurship studies. So that's the what I'm doing right now, trying to connect all these dots.
So you're quite a polymath yourself. I mean, if I were to think about, you have a PhD in finance,
Yeah,
and then you worked as a system engineer, then you worked
yeah,
as a cabin attendant, and then you've done your PhD again in the field of
entrepreneurship.
polymathy,
Hmm.
and now you're sort of bringing in entrepreneurship. Um,
Yeah.
so how? So now, I have two sort of areas that I want to pursue with you. One of which is, you said that there was some of the research that you predicted, that you came across, which can predict that where a person is likely to turn out to be, a polymath in future. And what would that
Hmm.
be? I mean, so what are some of those characters? Talk to me about a couple of them.
Yes, for sure. So it always started with which characteristics of human behavior can we identify systematically and that are consistent in life. For example, if you are like this one day and another day you're different, it's like it's mood, it's something related to a more fickle characteristics of a person. We wanted the more stable characteristics. And the stable characteristics, they are they have to be connected with our biology simply by the fact that we are biological chemical machines walking and trying to make sense in this world. So if it doesn't have a connection with biology, it must be wrong because everything that we do is fueled and driven by our how our biology works, right? So this model came from Irina Trofimova, from a very long lineage of researchers going back to Ivan Pavlov, the guy from the famous experiment with
Pavlovian
the dogs.
reflex, yes.
Yeah, but what people don't know that they are kind of forefathers or grandparents of what we understand today as neuroscience. He and Alexander Luria. So in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, it was the time that they had big ideas with small data. And today we have big data and small ideas. So those people are trying to make sense of the world, of nature, but they couldn't perform the analysis that we can do. And today we can perform so many analyses, but people are afraid to take chances, to take risks at grander theories because they can be attacked from so many sides. Okay, so we don't worry about that and try to get those ideas back and try to understand what are those characteristics. And she ended up with 12 characteristics based on our natural systems. Okay, so what does an animal, a living thing, do in to exist? So this thing, person, us, we have to collect information from the world and then act in the world. So there are two basic systems. And the third system, we are not just like collecting, doing all the time. Sometimes we have to stop and keep doing the same thing. So we have the maintenance system. We have three basic systems that fit neatly together with how the biology works, with how the neuronal system works. So the efferent system brings information, the afferent system integrates the action into the world, and then we have the system of maintenance of actions. So for example, here we're using...
let me just so that I can keep pace with your thought, that you're
Yeah.
saying
one thing that people do is to gather the information. Second, you
Yeah,
said, is that they need to act on it. And the
yeah,
third is that you need to do it repetitively so that,
yes.
there is maintenance of that. And what is the characteristic that predicts, give me two characteristics that can predict that somebody is going to be
Uh,
polymath? What
yeah,
is the early indication?
I'm gonna go there right now. So at the intellectual level, a polymath person has, or not has, but is inclined to gather a lot of information. It's an inclination, a natural inclination. So the person's like that since they are kind of babies. So some babies they are more still, and some babies are like, so it's very early. So that's one characteristic. And in her research and in my research now, we call that probabilistic processing. So they want to process everything and try to make sense of everything. So they are not quiet.
They want to connect the dots between
Yeah, they
different
are
things.
not quiet until they understand, until they connect, until they make a theory of why this causes that, why this goes together with that and not this. So this is the kind of processing that's called
Okay, so
probabilistic. That's the
that's
first one.
one. Okay.
The second one is about plasticity. So the first one is more about gathering information and making sense of the information, right? Plasticity is how fast and how effective you can integrate new actions when things change. So you make a plan, okay? I'm going from A to B. Then something happens, a pandemic. I can't do this path of A to B as I thought before. So people with more plasticity, they find it easier to change paths, to
So
integrate
more flexible, more adaptable,
more
all of that.
adaptability.
So one you
Yeah.
said is the ability to connect different things and form up their theories in their head. That's one. The
Yes.
second is, they should be able to be adaptable because, now you can sort of see that, okay, this has changed. So now I can still do something. So being able to look at that. Is there a third
Yes.
one that we can
Yeah,
think of?
there is. And the third one is the capacity to sustain attention. Why this is so important and so neglected today? Because if you go to the creative people, right, in the world, the great people, they didn't create something out of nothing. They first amassed knowledge. They first had quality in their pieces of knowledge. But to have quality in something, first you have to sit down and learn in depth. Okay?
Mm.
Or if you're doing sports, you have to train a lot as well. So you must have the ability to concentrate. And why do I talk so much about this point? Because today there are so many things that are trying to buy your attention, to distract you, and like the people today, if they are not careful, their attention is going to be all the time, taken from by something, by someone who wants your attention to them. So you have to drive the ability to drive your attention to attain a goal. Because polymathic people, okay, in contrast with dilettantes and other like people that are not more profound, they are achievers. Okay, they don't need to finish all of their projects. Some projects fail. We abandon them. It's normal. But some of them we do have to finish. If you can't finish at least one project, so it's going to be detrimental to your polymathy. So
Okay.
it's
Okay.
important to have
So
quality.
let me
Mhm.
pause and just sort of make sense of all the things that you talked about so
Yes.
far. So Michael, one of the things you talk about in one of the predictors of being a polymath is that you have interest in multiple things, but you are able to take enough information to be able to connect the dots and find and make a theory of how things work. Yeah,
Yes.
so that is one element of it. The second element you said is about adaptability, that polymathic people are adaptable. So if you look at someone like Satyajit Ray or even Marie Curie, who had a Nobel Prize in physics and chemistry, two fairly diverse disciplines, if you will, um,
Mhm.
is able to take all the information from one, make sense of it, also take and build on that into something else, and then sort of go with that. So that's your second characteristic. And the third element, which also to some extent, if you sort of look at it, is yes, you dabble. When people confuse polymathy with jack of all trades, it's not. I mean, jack of all trades is just doing a little bit of everything every day. Polymaths are people who will stay the course and pursue something over a span of time, yeah, and they'll keep refining it. So what you talked about in the human process, that you are able to maintain and build
Mhm.
that very deeply. That is the third characteristic. So people who are polymaths, they don't just learn one sentence of, let's say, Portuguese and then say, okay, I know how to say that. I know how to speak Portuguese. No, but they would have studied it enough to be able to sort of acquire a certain degree of expertise. Have I got the model that you are working on so far? What
Yeah,
else is
perfect.
there to understand polymathy?
Yeah, just to add one word. So I
Hmm.
call it the level that you have to reach to to qualify as that. You need to have a command of that subfield or that area, generally sub area that you are working. Okay, when you have this command, then you can join the dots in a really effective way. If not, it's haphazard. It's kind of you know it's it has to be based on a network that's that has quality in that. Okay, so it doesn't have quality in first
So,
place.
so
How
you
can you
also
build the
need to
knowledge?
have, so which
Mm.
means in, I'm hearing another element, which is that when you have multiple disciplines, you also have multiple networks,
Hmm.
and you are able to sort of cut across those networks and connect the dots even through the relationships. Is that something that you found?
Yeah, in fact, uh, we never have the ability to look like outside of our heads. The only
Hmm.
way to think outside of the box is when you have multiple perspectives. That's the only way. Because we are like the blind person touching the elephant,
Sure.
this picture, right? So
Yeah.
we cannot, how can I say, stop being blind. We are ever blind, always blind. The only thing we can do is to have different experiences and then use our processing to make a better picture. So, in order to understand things more thoroughly or in a whole, you have to use a polymathic kind of processing. So that's why that's what gives you depth of understanding as well,
Perfect.
right?
So, Michael,
Mm-hmm.
we've got a question from one of the listeners here, Navarone B. His
Mm-hmm.
question is: do you see the risk of linking codification of polymathic characteristics to genes, which is problematic in today's modern or political world, even though the scientific data may be there? Any idea how in the future
Yeah,
things like IQ, this may be misused? IQ is misused. Do you think this could also be misused?
yeah. Okay, let's go. One thing is the biology. Okay, so we can say that plasticity is associated with the dopaminergic system. Okay, and that sustainability of attention is the acetylcholine system. Okay, this is quite consensual, but biology doesn't equal genetics. Okay, so many things they get structured, okay, after the birth, okay, or within, during pregnancy. So not necessarily everything is going to be codified at the gene. Okay, of course, it's codified at the gene level, but it's going to be manifested that way. It's not. Nobody is determinant in science in terms of genetics determining perfectly everything. It's an inclination, of course. So the genes will tell you how likely you're going to be to gain weight or not to gain weight, or how the range of how tall you're going to be, but not the exactly thing. And these are very complex characteristics. Okay, so that's a crazy mixture of genes working, and even if you have the genes, they may or may not manifest. Remember, ants have the same gene, but one gets to be a soldier, one gets to be a worker, one gets to be a queen, depending on how you feed the ant. So remember that. So genes manifest differently, and there are so many things working in an ensemble to make a person what
Absolutely.
they are. Okay,
One,
and
one,
okay, go on.
one. Sorry, I
Okay.
interrupted you? Please complete it.
No,
I'm
no,
sorry.
yeah, yeah. Regarding IQ, same thing. Of course, there are genes that make some kind of processing faster or slower or easier or harder, but that goes into the same direction. Okay. Yep.
So, Navarun, one of the ways I would look at it is, you have IQ is one part of it, the ability to learn something. And, Michael has sort of
Mm-hmm.
alluded to that. But I think there are two other elements. One is, how likable you are. And, the third is drive. Your ability to actually, pick yourself up to some extent. He did refer to both these as well in terms of the
Mm-hmm.
network, as well as your ability to stick to a particular subject, drive going back and consistently performing the art or something. So there are lots and lots of students who get the same input in college, but not everybody who's graduated from the most prestigious university ends up in the same place because of a
Mm-hmm.
number of factors. So the world outside plays a very strong role in as much as nature does, nurture does, and then the external context also makes a difference. I mean, with the same set of just pick a country randomly from the map and change the place where you were born, and the opportunities that you will be working with will be different, so on and so forth. So yes, we can sort of certainly look at that. Anurag, Vesh has another question, that a person might display a polymathetic mindset which is easier to spot, while destination might be far away, and could be something different. So that is another element that we are sort of looking at. um, Michael, I want to go into this whole element that when you think of a polymath, a question I have always had. Say, let's say there is the human resource director of a company. The person needs to know, compensation benefits. The person needs to know labor laws. The person needs to know, let's say, learning and development to a reasonable extent. Would that role be called a polymath, or that would not be called a polymath?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we have to go back to the three pillars of polymathy, right? So depth, breadth, and integration. All right. So if the person got to this level, so the person has a good enough level of depth. So let's depart from this assumption. And so the thing is how broad you have to be, right? So how many disciplines? Uh, the thing is each field, okay, and each profession has kind of the typical amount of knowledge that one is expected to have, right? So if you're gonna work, if you're gonna reach a director level at a major company, you are expected to have an MBA level of knowledge, right? In MBA, you have marketing, you have finance, you have HR. So for me, it's more how can you deviate, okay, from what everybody else is doing. So for me, this breadth has to do about deviance in a good way. So what can you bring that's extra from what's expected? So although it is expected, some roles are more polymathic in nature. So I agree with that. So these roles are more polymathic from the outset. You start. If you are in this role, you're more polymathic. But besides that, what else can you bring different, extra, and which works, of course? If you bring something that doesn't work, you
Sure.
you just filter out and then bring something else. So for me, a polymathic person is a person that is not satisfied with the set of knowledges that are expected to their role. So they're bringing something that's unexpected from a different field. So I would say that a polymathic HR director or in any position is a person that goes beyond what is typical, even if the role is polymathic. Okay, and go beyond bringing something from a field that perhaps people don't expect, okay,
So
or
bringing
experiences.
something from a completely different field, like let's say theater into HR, or
Yeah, yeah.
sports into HR, music into HR, etc. How many such fields does one need to be bringing in to be able to say that is two fields enough? Two completely different fields, that somebody is very good in data science and very good in storytelling. Is that guy a polymath, or does it have to be more than two or three or four, or what is that number? How many such
Yeah,
fields?
yeah, there is no consensus, okay? Every person who studied the topic has a different number. My personal number is to have command of three different subfields, okay? But command uh, and apply it in at least two big projects at least the professional level that can draw on different and unexpected sets of knowledge, okay? So that would be, for example, command of marketing and HR and something else, and the project to bring something extra, unexpected, like music or theater or sports or
Right. So we have
hard sciences.
question again from Anurag, who says that also, is it possible to roadmap polymathy journey, or is it just open exploration and opportunities? Is there a predictive path? And then I also have another question from Preeti Shroff, which I'll bring up in a little bit. But first, this question: is there a path one should take? What
Okay,
would that be?
so in my latest article, I proposed that there are two types of things or of events that can lead you towards polymathy. So one type of polymath is the pull type. So it's self-driven. So you self-direct toward polymath. So I discovered this, I want to do that, and then you go. But there is the push type of polymathy. So events that make you more polymathic, because sometimes you lose your job and then the situation is bad and then you start a company. So when you do this movement that's pushed, perhaps you didn't want to leave your job, but because an event happens, you had to learn more, and then you end up being more polymathic than you were. All right. And what we have seen is that different polymaths can have very different paths. So some people started more like a specialist, and other people started like as butterflies, almost as jack of all trades and dilettantes, and then they found some areas of interest. But what's more important? A polymathic person has a range of projects. They choose the projects, and they achieve some level of command in things that are different, and more importantly, they can surprise with unexpected connections. For me, which is very important for the type of polymathy that I'm interested in, which is creative polymathy, not the person that is like the hermit in the mountain, having all knowledge but doesn't do anything with that. Okay, so different paths.
Lovely. I'm going to, put, so you're saying that not only good enough to have an interest in many different things, just gathering knowledge, but also trying it out and creating something is an important element of polymathy. Preeti Shroff has got a comment, which is that, the great point about convergence and divergence, breadth and depth, and above all, that extra mile that makes one unique thought leader and practitioner, and connecting diverse, unusual dots is creativity in leadership. You also have, another comment, major comment from Surendra Patel, who says that in India, according to colleges, universities, technology institutions, companies, you must have a common platform to engage the required workforce. There must be advanced HR cell with the coordinator, and to do coordination with the company, related medical emergency tie-ups, etc. So that's another thing. Anurag comments about the fact that you have to surprise the people with connections between different disciplines. So I guess we are sort of, so a couple of things you talked about is that there must be at least three disciplines which are not connected. Um, Now, I'm going to sort of put a different question. When I think about someone like Roger Federer, Roger Federer is famously known to have started his life as a sportsman, in everything other than tennis. I mean, so he was a swimmer, he played basketball, he played golf, he was a wrestler, and then eventually, and many more actually, he was a great athlete as well. But then he suddenly discovers tennis, and of course, we all know that the rest, as they say, is
Mhm.
history. Um, do polymaths actually land up making better career choices, or are they more miserable because they always think that maybe the next career choice that they do is going to make them happy? You are a polymath yourself, and you've gone from multiple things which are completely unconnected, if I would say. You've moved from a PhD. It's not even a general level, it's a PhD. You've got it in finance, then you go
Uh-huh.
on to do a job as a systems engineer. All right, that's also at a reasonable degree of proficiency. Then you become a cabin attendant so that you can indulge in your love for travel. And then you sort of come back and you get interested in polymathy, and you pursue it enough to do a PhD in polymathy.
Mhm.
And so that's a double PhD, is it?
No, no, yeah, yeah. My PhD was in finance, and now I'm doing studies in polymathy studies and merging with entrepreneurship. But the field
Oh
is
gosh, I mean
entrepreneurship
that's a
now.
good area. So,
That's my career. Yeah.
so you've set a tough
Hmm.
benchmark, and then you're going to live up to it. But does it mean that you can have a polymath in sports as well, like Roger Federer? Would that be polymathy in sports? And does every discipline have the ability to be polymaths?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we focus too much on some outcomes, right? So uh, on the status of being a polymath. So what do you need to do? But in fact, what I'm more interested in is what I call a polymathic orientation. So that's a slightly different construct. Okay, one thing is okay, what do you have? What status, what social status you have to be qualified by society as a polymath? Okay,
Hmm.
but more interesting to me is, do you have a polymathic orientation? Do you guide your actions towards, both breadth and depth? And then you try to integrate that. And the next thing is the role of opportunities. Okay. Perhaps if I had the opportunity, I would have been a tennis player as well, because I love tennis as well, but I never had. Okay. And and perhaps for Federer, now he's gonna retire. We expect someday, right? He probably is gonna do something different. You probably will expect that from him. He is already doing some other kind of work. The thing is, there are some pursuits in the human experience that have to be done at a certain. They have a window that you have to do that at the time. So sports, you have this window. If you don't start soon enough, you cannot get to a professional level, right? And I think Federer has this. It's a range, okay? It's a spectrum. It's not, you are either full polymath or not. You either have a full polymathic orientation or not. I don't, of course, I don't know him, but from the information that I got, it seems that like he has a more polymathic orientation, but he had this opportunity and he was so good at that. And of course, it's such a pleasurable career to be able, to practice sports and be happy with that. So let's see what he does when he retires.
Perfect. And does he
Yeah.
live up to the definition or not? I have another question from Bishwanath Sarangi. He asks, is there a danger of losing speciality in a core area by being a polymath? The person sort of has a core discipline, which, let's say there is a doctor. He also
Hmm.
becomes a musician, and then he starts
Hmm.
writing lyrics and doing all that. And then people stop coming to him as a doctor because they kind of see that music takes away so much of his time. Does it mean that there are disciplines like medicine? And I'm just sort of building on what Vishwanath has asked. It's a great question.
Hmm.
Would people stop taking his career as a doctor less seriously because now that he is, becoming a rock star, and I know, everybody in India would recognize the person that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But would it mean that people would stop taking him seriously as a doctor? What
Yeah.
is your take?
Yeah. The problem is not the person within him or herself. It's how do you communicate with society? Nobody's an island, right? So you have to live, you have to show value to somebody else, to your clients, to your bosses, to whoever,
Yeah.
right? So, and communication is not easy. Okay, you can be the most knowledgeable person in a subject, but not necessarily you're going to communicate that easily. So, what specialty does, it helps you communicate very fast what kind of value you can bring. So that's why when you build a Vita, people say, HR people say, okay, be very specific and tie up with what the vacancy is requiring. Because it's easier to communicate. And we are all complex beings, but your receiver doesn't have time to go deep into you, okay, to understand you. Only a few people will have time and want to do that. But when you go into the world, you have kind of to sell yourself. So you build this kind of persona. It's not yourself, it's a persona you build so you can communicate easier and you can achieve your goals. Okay, but I think that should not be detrimental to you pursuing the things that make you happy. So not everything you have to communicate to everybody, but if you make a career choice, of course you have to have this communicatable, easy to communicate story, because you have to convince people. Okay, because people are gonna hire you, people are gonna pay you. So that's the
convey
issue.
the value that you're creating,
Yeah.
even if you have multiple strengths, so you have to be able to create that. So yes,
Yeah.
I can completely. So would it mean that the most extreme polymath would be a philosopher? And the reason why I ask that is, it's Anurag has asked that question, but I am also sort of building this in academics. The highest discipline is philosophy. You get a PhD, Doctor of Philosophy. So
Hmm.
would it mean that all the disciplines eventually merge towards philosophy? Would you say that?
Oh, that's a very cool point that's very overlooked. How depth turns into breadth. Because when you dig deep enough, you're going to see connections. And that's something very cool that people, and especially people that are very young, don't get that when that, how can I say, some boundaries open new boundaries. Okay, so when you decide to study something and you go deep enough, you start to see that okay, we don't even need to go to philosophy. Let's stuck with hard sciences. If you go into biology and then you go to the cells, and cells have atoms, and then the atoms connect, and in the end, so people, for example, that are studying the brain, they are trying to see what the electrons are making that can how can I say, create our thoughts. Okay,
Oh,
so
absolutely. I mean, today, the discovery of a lot of the things in biology is done through engineering. So actually, have to go that deep to be able to find the connection. So what it seems is that when you do depth, even in one field, you are able to at some point of time cross the boundaries of that discipline and actually begin to appreciate more. And then, on the other hand, when you move up and sort of build breadth in multiple fields, but enough depth, you have those three pillars that you talked about, you
yeah.
again have the possibility of building a connection. So, both ways you can have that. I mean, that's such a powerful thought that you can build it in either ways. We are sort of today, just for the listeners who joined us late, we are talking to Dr. Michael Araki. He's joining us from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and he's an expert in the area of polymaths. These are people who have at least 3 areas of expertise, and they have reasonable degree of depth in each one of these 3 areas, and they are able to see the interconnectivity between these three, which probably is the reason why they started becoming polymaths in the first place. I
Mhm.
want to sort of put a hypothesis, so I wrote this book called Dreamers and Unicorns, in which one of the things that I talk about is, when you look at, there are 5 shifts that I mentioned in the book, which are driving all the change. If you sort of look at the principles, one of them is that you need to be boundaryless. In some sense, what I mean is, when you think about an organization which is going to be successful, you have to start looking at many different factors to be able to be successfully competitive today. Because there was a time when, let's say, your competition, if you are in the, taxi business, it would come from another taxi service company, but it would not come from a delivery company. Today, that is possible. That's happening. I mean, if you look at, companies which are in that food delivery model, suddenly Zomato gets competition from Uber, because Uber gets into food delivery as well, and then so does Swiggy, and so does something else. So you get competition from multiple places. Therefore, one of the thoughts that I had is organizations need to be also polymathic, because, if you look at the most successful organizations, it's very hard to say what business they are in. I mean, Amazon, what business is Amazon in? It's very hard. I mean, they're distributing movies. They're an e-commerce company, but they're also in many other forms of business, whether it's the web services, they're doing that. They were big in the cloud space. You look at Google, so there are many examples that we can think of, super successful companies, which in some sense are going to be polymaths. But it's not every company which becomes a polymath. So in that sense, maybe the number of companies which are polymaths is also limited by the number of human beings who are polymaths. Do you think going forward, polymath leaders are going to be more successful because they have the agility, they can look across disciplines, and they are going to, be flexible enough to be able to sort of connect the dots and see those connections? Is that the
Yep.
model going forward? What do you say?
Yeah. I think that the data and what you're seeing corroborates this point. And I like the sentence that change is changing. The very nature of change is now different. So what you expect as a leader, as a strategist in a company, is different from what you expected in the past. Okay? And, well, the thing is, since we have this acronym VUCA, right? Everybody now knows it: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So when the world becomes more VUCA, more complex, what kind of work do you need to do? So in economics, we have this idea of a static state, an ideal state.
As they say.
Oh, sorry?
Ceteris paribus. They say other things being equal.
Yeah.
Static and then study
Yeah.
it. No.
So everything works and flows inside that, and nothing changes. So more and more, we can't build our models or mindsets based on that. So the dynamics are more, how can I say, the changes are more critical, and they happen more often, and they are qualitatively different. So what kind of the person can flourish in this kind of environment? So let's do the opposite. What kind of worker we had in the past that were useful? So after the Industrial Revolution, the factories, people worked like robots. So the whole environment remained static. So a person at Ford Motors could hammer at the same point every time, and the other person could screw at the same time. So he works like a robot. So a robot today needs the environment to be the same, right, to work. If you have a robot, I don't know if you have seen that robots that take a glass of water and give other people. But if you change the position of the glass of water, the robot can't work.
Correct,
And
correct.
today we have the opposite of that. So what kind of person, what kind of organization do you need when the environment is changing more abruptly? So you need people who can make sense fast, who can make sense of things fast, build theories with changing information. So that's the first characteristic of polymath. You need less rigidity. So if you're too rigid, you're gonna drown, right? So that's the second characteristic of polymathics, more plasticity, the ability to change plans because of changing conditions. And finally, you must have a core of things that you do well. Because if you just change and you are understanding things, but you don't have a substance, a core ability that you can build upon, you're not going to do good, high quality products, right? You're going to change and your product's going to be terrible because you didn't have in first place what it takes to do a good product or service. So it matches perfectly the characteristics of the polymathic person. So the organizations, because we have this environment that's more challenging, that has different kinds of changes, they are requiring more this kind of behavior, which fits more naturally with how polymathic people are and like to be. So that's my take, and I think that is the trend. I don't see much evidence that it's gonna be different, you know, because of all these things
Is that
converging.
why entrepreneurs are more likely to be polymaths? Is that why?
By definition, the entrepreneur, by definition, is the person that changes the static state. If you go to an economics book, it's the definition of entrepreneur. So in order to change the status quo, to do something useful, you have to have all these things. You have to have the courage to try something new, to pick something that nobody else is doing right now. Okay, if you do the same things that people are doing right now, you're not entrepreneur. You're not doing entrepreneurial action. You're doing the same thing. Sometimes it works, but it's not entrepreneurial. So it goes into the same direction. If you change, if you leave the world of the static state and you are introducing a novelty, these characteristics are going to be fundamental. Because you can, how can you get new ideas? It has to be from a different point of experience that everybody else is doing. And you can, it's experimental. You go to a company that hires the same kind of people from the same 3 schools with the same background. And you go to another company that has more diversity, but people are deep enough in what they do. The second company is going to be, and it's experimentally proven that they are more creative because they have different pieces of information. There is more conflict, okay? Sometimes you don't want conflict. You want people screwing and people hammering. You want zero conflict. But the situation today pushes you toward novel solutions, and then you have to deal with that. You have to deal with different people from different backgrounds, and then the leader has this kind of thermostat role that not too much conflict in which, you know, things are going to derail, but not too much conformity that nothing new is going to rise. So the leader today has this difficult role, and I think they have to be more polymathic and allow polymathy to flourish within their teams. So things can change for the better. That's my point.
What are 2 or 3 things one should be able to do to be able to encourage the polymathic orientation? Even if I'm not a polymath, what are things I should be able to do? What do you recommend?
Yeah. So what makes people not polymathic? Okay. One characteristic is the fear of failure. Okay. That I think that's one of the foremost characteristics, because if you're going to go to different areas, they have their kings and queens there, right? So you have to go into other people's territories, knocking the doors that people don't expect you to be knocking onto. So you have to have this courage, this boldness, in go in there and have a door at your face or fail miserably. So that's the first thing. If you are not prepared to fail and to have people slam the door at your face, it's going to be difficult. So that's the first thing to build. And it goes on to your dealing well with yourself, because some people are afraid, like to show that they are pursuing something different. What people will think about me if I'm a doctor and then I show myself as a musician. Okay, so there is this. I think many things are regards the person within themselves, because we have to prepare ourselves and then act upon the world. And the world is not fair. It's difficult. It has a lot of people. There is competition. There are a lot of unfair things. So I think the people who would like to be more polymathic should start there. So let me experiment more. What if I just try it? Okay, but delve a little bit. I don't like mathematics. Sometimes it's emotional. It's a trauma that the person had when they were 7 years old. So just fight those traumas, fight those fears, and try a little bit more. Try a little bit more would be my advice. Okay.
Perfect. Michael, it's been absolutely phenomenal. I had a couple of takeaways, one of which was that, don't be afraid to try out something completely different beyond what you've been taught. So you may have been trained to be, a doctor, but don't, if you have secretly nurtured curiosity about music, go ahead and pursue it. So pursuing your curiosity is one of the pieces that I took away from what you just said. The second piece that I thought was that, I like the idea that you said was that people who are more plastic, which is, plasticity, which is another word for adaptability. To be adaptable when the circumstances change. Hey, you can't, because of the pandemic, you have not been able to travel. So change your plan and sort of figure out what to do. And, the world has actually, I think, because of the pandemic, everybody's been forced to be a lot more adaptable. And now you kind of also see that wanting to go back to office, there's again that resistance, because we have again fallen back into that. Now let me just continue on this. So I just think that people just sort of, they keep using the phrase the new normal. And there is always almost this wish, fantasy that, the world is going to now this is the world. I figured it out. It's not going to change. No, it is going to change. The fact that we are now having so much of debate about, should we go back? Do we go back once a week? Do we go back 5 times a week? Why should we do this? Can we work out of this? Can we do this? Can work be adaptable? I mean, I just think that it's something for all of us to think about, that whether this is a sign that we may have become too complacent and comfortable in this setting. Remember how difficult it was in the early days when we moved into the home. We said, oh my God, how can you do this from home? How can you do this? You can't do sales on Zoom. You can't do all of that. We adapted. Now it's time to readapt and look at the resistance the world is facing. So that is my other question that struck me when you look at that. But overall, I just want to say that it was so fascinating hearing you and talking to you, and wish you the very best for your research. And I hope that this conversation is going to, invite more people to explore this. You can connect with Michael on linkedin.com/in Araki Michael. His email is arakimichael@gmail.com. And thank you so very much. And I hope, just a hint about, we have got another really super interesting guest coming up next Wednesday at 7 p.m. All I want to say as a hint is, the hint is lost in translation. And if you can, send me your guess about who do you think that guest is going to be, I'm going to send you a signed copy of my book, Dreamers and Unicorns. But you got to send in that response by tomorrow morning. So think about it and send that to me. Look forward to this. Take care. Thank you very much, Michael. Goodbye.